name is Carol Mitchell, the Director of the Justice, Ecology and Development Office, Genoa, of the Catholic Archdiocese of Perth. We were formerly known as the Catholic Social Justice Council. We were initially based at the Catholic Pastoral Centre in Highgate, but are currently based at the Newman Siena Centre in Doubleview. I have been in this role since the end of February last year. Firstly, though, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land where we are now gathered, the Whadjuk peoples of the Noongar Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present. I thank them for their guardianship of this land since the dream time. I acknowledge wrongs done to them by newcomers to this land and seek to be partners toward true reconciliation so we can all live together, peoples of all nations, in peace and harmony. In the papal encyclical Laudato Si, that we will begin exploring more tonight, Pope Francis calls us to listen to the voices of our Indigenous peoples, because for them, land is not a commodity, but a sacred space and a gift from God. I'm actually a person like Pope Francis who likes symbols, so I actually have a few here at the front of the desk, and hopefully you might have a look at a bit later. But even if you feel you need to have some reflective space during this session, hopefully there's something there that may resonate with you. Before we continue though, I would like you to join with me in saying the prayer for our Archdiocese of Perth. Now, it is actually written in the little leaflet that you have there, but it's also up on the screen, so whichever you find easier to read. And I need my specs. Gracious God, you have blessed our diocese with many gifts, and you call us to share those gifts with others. We thank you for this call and commit ourselves anew to responding with courage and generosity. In this time of challenge and hope for the Church, you invite us to start afresh from Christ your Son, and to contemplate his face so that we might recognise him in others, especially those who suffer. In doing so, may we experience a new wave of grace, so that the light of Christ may burn more brightly in our lives. Attune our hearts and minds to the presence of your Holy Spirit, that our Church may be transformed, our relationships be healed, and our nation grow in compassion and justice. With the intercession of St. Mary Piccola, who showed us new ways of living the gospel, we make our prayer through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you so much. As the Director of GEDO, the Justice, Ecology and Development Office within the Catholic Archdiocese of Perth, it is a privilege and a blessing to be a part of this collaboration, our common ground for our common home, living the joy of Laudato Si. I would like to acknowledge our venue hosts, the Redemptorists, and thanks specifically to John Hodgson for his enthusiasm and hospitality. Thanks, John. Thanks also to our umbrella agency for this course to explore Laudato Si, the Centre for Faith Enrichment, formerly known as Maranatha, Dr. Michelle Jones, who unfortunately is unable to be with us this evening, and Jim Smith, with other agency colleagues, Caritas Australia for WA, Sister Janet Palafox and Janine Murphy, Catholic Earth Care Australia, Nigel Hayward, and thank you for helping out here tonight, Nigel, and from Catholic Mission, Francis Leong, and again, Francis, thank you for helping me set up. I would also like to acknowledge and welcome all of you on this shared journey to explore the wisdom of Pope Francis in his papal encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. As many of you already know, the title comes from the words of the beautiful canticle of the creatures from St. Francis of Assisi. Laudato Si mi Signor, Praise be to you, my Lord. As the namesake, guide and inspiration for the Bishop of Rome, that is Pope Francis, and given we have just celebrated All Saints' Day, it is important to note that St. Francis is the patron saint of all who work and study in the area of ecology. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis states, St. Francis, faithful to Scripture, invites us to see nature as a magnificent book in which God speaks to us and grants us a glimpse of his infinite beauty and goodness. Pope Francis then provides scriptural references from Romans 1:20. His eternal power and divinity have been made known through his works since the creation of the world. From Wisdom 13:5, through the greatness and the beauty of creatures, one comes to know by analogy their maker. In the papal encyclical from Pope Francis, Laudato Si, a new dialogue or discourse, a new conversation is called for. By and through your attendance here this evening and in the upcoming weeks, you are already enabling this call to not only be heard, but to be actioned. Thank you so much for your generosity of collaboration, solidarity, and spirit. It's greatly appreciated. As many of you would already be aware, an encyclical is a letter circulated by the Pope to Catholic churches worldwide that provides an analysis of relevant issues in the light of the Gospel, the Word, and of the tradition of the Church, which adds to the body of the Church's social teaching, beginning more with Rerum Novarum on Capital and Labour back in 1891 by Pope Leo XIII. In this encyclical, though, Pope Francis addresses his letter, his message, his appeal, or the urgent challenge to protect our common home to the whole human family. This broader call to action from Pope Francis, addressed to everyone, builds on Pope St. John XXIII's message of peace in his papal encyclical Pacem in Terris, with the world teetering on the brink of nuclear crisis, that was addressed at that time to the entire Catholic world and indeed to all men and women of goodwill. Pope Francis is not the first to have a focus on ecology and creation. Blessed Pope Paul VI spoke about the ill-considered exploitation of nature in 1971, with St. John Paul II coining the phrase ecological conversion, which really refers to humans being put on this earth to look after everything, all of creation, to be ecological stewards or caretakers. And more recently, with Pope Benedict XVI, calling us to recognise that our actions or inactions impact on the social environment as well as the natural environment. In his papal encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis states that a true ecological approach always becomes a social approach. It must integrate questions of justice in debates on the environment, so as to hear both the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor. Pope Francis outlines that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, the word creation has a broader meaning than nature, for it has to do with God's loving plan in which every creature has its own value and significance. Nature is usually seen as a system which can be studied, understood, and controlled, whereas creation can only be understood as a gift from the outstretched hand of the Father of all, and as a reality illuminated by the love which calls us together into universal communion. In Laudato Si, Pope Francis calls for a revolution of our hearts and minds, for a transformation of our societies and individual lifestyles, to live in harmony with God's creation. Before I go any further though, I'll provide a brief overview of Genoa and the leadership that guides this agency to work to serve God towards justice and peace by thinking globally but acting locally. Internationally, we are guided by His Holiness Pope Francis, other Catholic bishops and religious throughout the world, and by leaders of goodwill and influence, also within an ecumenical, interfaith and secular space. Nationally, we are guided more by the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, ACBC, through the Justice, Ecology and Development Commission, which is why Archbishop Timothy wanted us to take on this name, and its agencies for justice, the Australian Catholic Social Justice Council, for Ecology, Catholic Earth Care Australia, and Development, Caritas Australia. In WA, we are guided by the state bishops and Archbishop Timothy Costello SDB more specifically within the Catholic Archdiocese of Perth. Again, recognising that we are influenced also by people, networks and agencies of goodwill, such as the Ecumenical Social Justice Roundtable, and I'm pleased to see some of my ecumenical friends here this evening. I will briefly explain what the Genoa logo represents, which is here, because you'll see how much it links in with creation and what we're talking about this evening. The image of the water flowing from the broken pot represents humanity, and the hands of God capture the water regardless of where it is flowing from. This is a representation of the cyclic fall and growth of the soul. God's love is shown with the two hands that signify healing and growth. The Lord is with us in the free flowing of the water, demonstrating the Alpha and the Omega of God's love, being with us at all times. The image of the tree is biblical, representing the cedars of Lebanon. These trees grow extremely large. The image of the tree and the incredible shade it provides represents God's shelter and love for all humanity by feeding, nourishing, and enabling us to grow. So I think you can see just how much our logo links in with Laudato Si and what Pope Francis has to say. My current role as the Director of the Justice, Ecology and Development Office within the Catholic Archdiocese of Perth enables me to live my faith through the call to action to be a missionary disciple and to spread the good news of Catholic social teaching. I've actually come from more of a social justice background, having worked mainly in government and non-government agencies prior to my appointment with the Archdiocese, and that was working more specifically with people with varying abilities, people with mental health challenges, some of those comorbidities, so where they may have some addictions as well, intellectual and physical disabilities, people from a non-English speaking background, and my personal passion has often been a bit more to do with women and children's safety. So I've worked in prevention to do with domestic violence and sexual assault, particularly for women from a non-English speaking background, and working with people from prison when they first come out in an organisation called Outcare. So working in social justice space is personal and professional passion. The vision for Genoa is for a peaceful and just world that remembers that we belong to each other as global citizens, who willingly and cooperatively work for the benefit of all humankind and creation, now and for future generations, to think globally but act locally with all people of goodwill. The mission is to serve God in justice and peace by defending individual dignity, promoting solidarity and fostering the common good, by working to cultivate personal and social responsibility and to stand with the marginalised to actively safeguard the integrity of all of creation. In his apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, Living the Joy of the Gospel, Pope Francis stated, "The Church, guided by the Gospel of mercy and by love of mankind, hears the cry of justice and intends to respond to it with all her might. In his papal encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis states that the climate is a common good, belonging to all and meant for all. At the global level, it is a complex system linked to many of the essential conditions for life. He goes on to explain that access to safe, drinkable water is a basic and universal human right, since it is essential to human survival and as such is a condition for the exercise of other human rights. Our world has a grave social debt towards the poor who lack access to drinking water because they are denied the rights to a life consistent with their inalienable dignity. Thinking globally but acting locally, Genoa has been involved in advocacy towards the Sustainable Development Goals that are replacing the Millennium Development Goals at the end of this year, in relation to having human rights language included in the context of water and sanitation. That is, the human right to clean water and effective sanitation being included in the SDGs. Such advocacy will need to continue into the future as this single goal and action, or inaction, impacts on so many other goals that determine whether the poor, vulnerable and marginalised have their most basic needs met, such as in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In Laudato Si, on the care for our common home, Pope Francis states that care for the environment is a matter of intergenerational justice. He says the notion of the common good also extends to future generations. The global economic crises have made painfully obvious the detrimental effects of disregarding our common destiny, which cannot exclude those who come after us. We can no longer speak of sustainable development apart from intergenerational solidarity. Intergenerational solidarity is not optional, but rather a basic question of justice, since the world we have received also belongs to those who will follow us. Director of Catholic Earthcare Australia, Jackie Ramond, who will be joining Nigel in 2 weeks, said Laudato Si is a game changer for the Catholic community, and it offers us in Australia a powerful moral and spiritual imperative for environmental and social action. Following the release of the papal encyclical Laudato Si in June 2015, and through such international leadership, the Global Catholic Climate Movement, GCCM, began mobilising Catholics throughout the world to support climate change action through a petition to world leaders, stating, "Climate change affects everyone, but especially the poor and most vulnerable people. Impelled by our Catholic faith, we call on you to drastically cut carbon emissions to keep the global temperature rise below the dangerous threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius and to aid the world's poorest in coping with climate change impacts." Ban Ki-moon from the United Nations stated, "Climate change does not respect borders. It does not respect who you are, rich and poor, small and big. Therefore, this is what we call global challenges, which requires global solidarity." You will hear more about the specific impacts on many of our poor neighbouring island nations in the next few weeks. But as people of faith, we are also people of hope. So achievable outcomes will be proposed for your discernment and action in each of the upcoming sessions. As people of privilege, we in Australia are called to act responsibly, now and for future generations, recognising also our interconnectedness as global citizens. Thinking globally, but acting locally, the Global Catholic Climate Movement asked for words of support and gratitude to to be expressed to Pope Francis following the release of Laudato Si. This is the brief message that Genoa forwarded to Pope Francis via the Global Catholic Climate Movement back in June. Holy Father, thank you for your beautiful words of wisdom in your encyclical, calling us to care for our common home, Mother Earth and all of creation. You challenge us to remember that we belong to each other as global citizens, working for the common good. O Lord, seize us with your power and light. Help us to protect all life, to prepare for a better future, for the coming of your kingdom of justice, peace, love and beauty. Praise be to you. Amen. That last section was from Laudato Si. Anyone like to share, what Catholic social teaching principles or ways of thinking really stood out for you? It's okay if you don't.
One
Yes.
was on energy. Are you able to?
It's just some people may not be able to hear. So if you're okay with that, we don't have a road in. There you go. Just so other people can hear.
Yeah, I can't remember where, but it was to do with energy and saving the planet. And I was thinking Australia, especially WA, is one of the best places for solar. And Pope Francis did mention solar. I've forgotten what page, solar energy. And I thought WA would be the starting point for business people to invest in. And I could also see the day when the scientists will be able to devise and make some cells in solar that needs to be researched, that it could be transported to other countries, cold climates for instance. So I can see that happening, but we need scientists and we need to be able to, the finance to be able to do the research. But it's a great opportunity for solar in WA.
Thank you so much. And that's probably something that will be raised a bit more when Nigel speaks, because wearing his Catholic Earth Care Australia hat. So that's in a couple of weeks' time. Also, we are well placed for solar. We're also well placed for wind. We're also well placed for waves. So there's a lot of things that we could be looking at, and really this is just the start of some of that exploration. So thank you for that comment. Does anyone else have any comments they would like to make? Yes?
I don't need it.
People at the back may not.
I'll stand up and you get a better view. I want to sit down. One of the things that strikes me about the encyclical is that the previous encyclicals, Rerum Novarum and Quadragesimo Anno, were very much a Western Europe and a Western cultural thing, workers, wages, all of that thing. Now suddenly we've woken up to the fact that a large percentage of the world doesn't have drinking water. So all of the old agendas of, the unions and better conditions and all of the rest, suddenly our eyes are being opened to the point that, there's actually people who can't get water. So, bringing us right down to what is the real issues for the world. There's global warming and everything else, but the social justice part of it is so strong.
Thank you for that. And that links in very well with our preferential option for the poor, and that will be more of a focus next week with Caritas. Obviously, they'll be looking more at those sort of elements, and obviously that's an ongoing issue for all of us, so we need to be very mindful of that. I'll continue. Oh, sorry, yes, there's someone at the back.
Yes, Solzhenitsyn said that there would be more damage done in the first half of this century than through unmitigated greed than the communists did in the last century. And Francis is strong on being satisfied with what you've got and not wanting more than you need.
Thank you for that, and that comes back to the live simply so that all may simply live. So thank you very much for that, that's really great. I will briefly remind people of some of our Catholic social teaching principles, many of which are included and explained in Laudato Si. Human beings are created in the image of God and therefore are endowed with dignity. This carries with it certain rights and responsibilities. Solidarity presupposes that human beings live in an interdependent relationship. The human community is connected across cultures, classes, creeds, and countries. Subsidiarity affirms the rights of individuals and social groups to make their own decisions and accomplish what they can by their own initiative and industry. Individuals live in common with others, and the rights of individuals must be balanced with the wider common good of all. The rights and needs of others must always be respected. Working for the wider common good includes acting with and on behalf of the poor, marginalised, vulnerable and powerless. This is often expressed as having a preferential option for the poor. Working for the common good includes actively safeguarding the integrity of all of creation. This is often referred to as being environmental stewards or stewards of all creation. Another Catholic social teaching principle is to do with common or universal destination of goods. This principle insists that everyone on planet Earth is entitled to the basic necessities of life from the Earth's resources. This precedes the principle of the right to private property. And from the comment made before, unfortunately, we've often had focus more on the rights of individuals, and a lot of that comes back to money and power that goes with that. There are many other Catholic social teaching principles or thinking that Pope Francis refers to, either directly or indirectly, within Laudato Si, to care for our common home. These are just some of them, so you may notice that I use some of those words in my talk so far, and a lot of those are ones that Pope Francis has mentioned himself. So rights and responsibilities, dignity of work and rights of workers, common or universal destination of goods, community, interdependence, cooperation, valuing diversity and culture of others, change, development, transformation, empowerment, human rights, distributive justice, political participation, a simple lifestyle, and peace promotion. So, although I have been focusing more on Catholic social teaching, a lot of these, that's why I'm also using the word Catholic social thinking as well, because some of those are in that broader sense. Pope Francis has clearly stated in his encyclical that we need to work in solidarity with all people of goodwill, to work for the common good as global citizens. That is, we need to recognise our interconnectedness as one family with one common home. We are challenged by those who deny that climate change is a critical concern, especially for the poorest in our world, or those who question the Church being involved in issues perceived to be of or for the sciences and political arena. Pope Francis said in Laudato Si that the Church does not presume to settle scientific questions or to replace politics. But I am concerned to encourage an honest and open debate so that particular interests or ideologies will not prejudice the common good. However, Pope Francis also recognises there has been a tragic rise in the number of migrants seeking to flee from the growing poverty caused by environmental degradation. They are not recognised by international conventions as refugees. They bear the loss of lives they have left behind, without enjoying any legal protection whatsoever. Sadly, there is widespread indifference to such suffering, which is even now taking place throughout our world. Given the current statement from the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference for 2015-16 is for those who have come across the seas, justice for refugees and asylum seekers. And climate change refugees are seeking our support and action now. We need to be a part of the people's movement to mobilise ourselves and then others to action immediately. For those of you who may not have seen or received the ACBC, that's the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference, Social Justice Statement through your parish on Social Justice Sunday, the last Sunday in September, I have some resources on the table on the side there. Please help yourself to the Social Justice Statement. There's also a 10-step leaflet, which is your little action guideline, if you like. And there's also a prayer card that was developed by the Australian Catholic Social Justice Council on behalf of the ACBC. In the sheet protector that you should all have there, and I've got more if people didn't receive any, I have some resources that you can look at now or take away with you later to look at in your own time, but it's actually to help you discern some of the actions that you want to take and ones that you might consider to help mobilise your family and your friends as well. But I would like to draw your attention particularly to the See Judge Act booklet that's in the little pocket there. This is to assist you with your decision making through a reflective process that results in action. We can all play our part towards social justice action by looking at the signs of the times through the See Judge Act process of discernment. It was actually mentioned last week how that's come more from the Cardine movement, and it's one that's also used by YCS, YCW. There are other processes that, other ways that people may choose in terms of their discernment, but this is one that I find very helpful and is one that I promote within Genoa. So we can all play our part towards social justice action. We are called to see with the eyes of Christ. We are called to judge or assess with the heart of Christ. This includes theological reflection and prayer. When we decide to take action, we are called to act as Christ would today. In the upcoming weeks, I would like you to consider what course of action you would like to get involved in, using the See Judge Act process to guide you, or another process if that's your preference. Right now, though, I would like you to consider if there might be some barriers to your action, or the action of others, like family or friends. I'd also like you just to have a little bit of a buzz again with the people near you. If you would like to write something on, I've got a little sheet of paper on the side, you are most welcome, but please don't feel that you need to do that. The idea is just to get you to talk with your peers, the people beside you. Just have a little bit of a chat about some of the things that you've heard from maybe some other people, some family, friends, as to what might be stopping them from acting in relation to environmental issues broadly, or the charge from Pope Francis to get really engaged with Laudato Si. So maybe just have a little bit of a chat with the people beside you, and then we'll come back in a moment. So this is just a few minutes. Just have a chat with the people beside you. when I finish my talk. I'll try to finish a little bit earlier so we can have this sort of discussion, because obviously that's very healthy. So I'm really sorry to cut you short there, but please maintain that energy, because it'd be really lovely for you to continue that, you know, probably from about 8:15 all going well. I thought you might have been Jim. I know you like to have a chat. Okay, did anyone want to share with the group some of the barriers that were, or potential obstacles that were identified?
Yeah, I have a barrier. It was all women's.
Shall I put my feminist cap on to respond to that? Thank you for sharing. Would anyone else like to make a comment? Oh, that can get people quiet.
As a woman, I'll make a comment.
This is the sisterhood.
I think one of the major obstacles to the challenges that Pope Francis is putting towards us is he's actually really calling us to a complete conversion in our way of looking at how we live our lives. Because I think that, you know, what comes through most strongly to me in the document is that if we really are concerned about what's happening in our world, the environment we live in, we really have to look at how does our lifestyle impact on that environment. And that means we have to make changes to the way we use resources personally in our lives, and the way we even access resources that are made available to us by other organisations. And the other thing is that I think that he's challenging this whole concept that, which we have in the Western world, and we particularly have in a country like Australia, that economic growth is the ultimate good thing we should work towards. When actually economic growth, the way we look at it in our countries, is actually not to the benefit of all people, not to the common good, because actually we are consuming more and more resources and seeing that as a way to go forward. And at some point we have to say enough is enough. And most of us, because we benefit from this system, don't want to really make those changes in our life. So it's a very strong challenge to us individually and to our society. And I guess that's why there was such a reaction in lots of ways from governments even towards what Pope Francis was saying, because it's challenging them to really rethink the whole paradigm on which our society exists.
Thank you so much. Yes, the economic rationalist following definitely needs to be reconsidered. Thank you. Did anyone else want to make some comments?
Yes, the research bears out what's on the screen, that the majority of Australian women believe in God, and a majority of Australian men do too, but a minority act on what they believe. And the way, you must externalise your thinking by stating what you're going to do, writing it down, making something external and committing yourself, or it usually doesn't happen.
Thank you very much for that, and that's true. We do need that sort of leadership, and all of the people that are involved in this collaboration are incredibly heartened by your attendance, and also by the energy, the fact that you are really engaging with this issue, because we see you as missionary disciples helping us to take this forward in weeks, months, years to come. So don't be panicked by that. But by your attendance, you have already shown an incredible willingness and readiness to take this message on board. And I believe Pope Francis also would be most grateful. So, not that I can speak for him, but thank you again for your attendance and for your participation. Some of the potential barriers to action that have been stated in a really general sense. And with this, I mean, when you're just talking with your peers, with your family, with your friends, these are often a lot of the comments that I've heard, where people are saying things like, what difference can I make? What can I do? Mother Teresa says, if you can't feed 100 people, then feed just one. So do what you can where you are right now, and maybe leave the rest to God. So there's a lot that we can do, but we also need to recognise that we are change agents. We are influencers. The fact that you are here already says that you have that readiness and willingness. So we hope to engage you further in this journey. So again, thank you for that. What difference can I make? Well, again, just by our conversation here, you've already taken on board that you're willing to go forward with this, with Laudato Si and with what Pope Francis has to say. So I'm not sure whether any of you have heard these comments, but these are all ones that I've heard. And I know they seem quite general, but they're ones that we can actually attend to. This is just a little reflection. This is just something that I want people to consider. Often when people do have the other statement, I've actually got this little statement in my office, and it reminds me that so often we get stuck in a head space rather than a heart space. And so it's trying to remind people of that sometimes we do just have to give something a try. We have to, as people of faith, we have to remember that we are people of hope. And so giving something a try, having a go, is actually a really good thing. It's a great start. I would like to share with you some of my favourite quotes. Again, these are ones I have in my office. Oh, even my little coffee cup is be the change you wish to see in the world. My children have heard that so many times. I think it's been probably since they were in early primary school. So Barack Obama, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. So with those people saying that, you know, who's going to do this? Tell them they're the ones that they can do it. You know, we are the ones we've been waiting for. And Pope Francis from Laudato Si has actually said, I urgently appeal them for a new dialogue about how we are shaping our planet. And we are change agents. All of us here can influence our family, friends, co-workers. We do have, we're in a position of power and influence. I have listed a few actions for your consideration. That is, some achievable outcomes for God's good creation. Again, a lot of these are simple ones to make a start. Weeks to come, there will be more detailed actions. So these are ones just in terms of that journey of discernment, just to really get you started. Once again, we would love people to read Laudato Si. As Jim said, there are a lot of documents around at the moment where you can actually read some abridged versions, even though once again we encourage you to read the whole document. But obviously a lot of people are time poor, so maybe to start with, reading some of the ones that, you know, just go through, give you a bit more of an overview, and then when you do have the time to really read the whole encyclical, because it really is worthwhile. It's a beautiful document, and there is so much wisdom in there, and so much that we can go forward with. You know, it really does give us a bit of an action plan as missionary disciples. Consider your broad spheres of influence. Again, that comes back to some of the barriers in terms of what difference can I make. Think about the people in your lives and the movers and shakers in your world. Think about who you could actually influence in getting them on board with this issue. Sign the Global Catholic Climate Movement petition. This is something that I know will also be promoted in some of the other sessions, but that's a great start. As I said, we've done that through Genoa, and there's lots of that. I'm sure many of you have already done that here as individuals. Also encourage you to do that through your workplace as well. Yes, that would be great. Nigel was just saying he has a hard copy here that people can sign this evening if you'd like to do that, rather than having to go online. And I know Nigel will be speaking more in due course about the People's Climate March. We're involved in an ecumenical social justice roundtable, as I mentioned before, and Radhika is one of our colleagues from the ecumenical, from that organisation, and so we're obviously trying to mobilise all Catholics, but we're also recognising that in our spheres of influence, it also goes into an ecumenical sense, into an interfaith space, as well as a secular space, because we are interconnected, we are global citizens, so we need to move beyond ourselves. The Caritas Pledge, again, that's something that I know will be mentioned in more detail next week. but it was something that was also mentioned when we had the launch out here on the lawn, and I know some people did sign the hearts, which is really lovely. I haven't actually got it up there, sorry Francis, but it was also trying to encourage people to buy the Francis Effect 2 book that's available from Catholic Mission, and that's a good way to also help support and broaden the reading of Laudato Si, because it actually looks at some different people throughout Australia that have, it's kind of giving their insight. It really is worthwhile. With the first one, Francis Effect, it was actually in relation to Evangelii Gaudium, Joy of the Gospel, and it really was a lovely way to support the reading of that document, of that apostolic exhortation. Yes?
Could I ask, if you emailed those 2 pages to us, if those who wanted, it would be really good because we have the links immediately.
Can do.
Okay. Can you put it on a list somewhere?
Yep, what I'll do is I'll mention that to, or Jim can mention that to the Centre for Faith Enrichment people. I work in the same office space as them, so they're my neighbours. So yes, it's quite achievable. We're looking at achievable outcomes, that's very achievable. With the Catholic Earth Care website, another thing that they have some really fantastic information about an Assisi program, and that's about becoming an ecological leader. And I know that this is something that Nigel would really love to happen in WA and some of the other states. They've actually had some wonderful pilgrimages where people have really been able to immerse themselves. Part of that is immersing yourself also in Indigenous culture as well, and that's something that we would really love to see that broaden, because obviously we don't have that representation here this evening, which is an incredible shame. So that's something that moving forward, that's something obviously we would like to see more of, because there's so much we can learn from the first Australians in terms of their care and custodianship of the land. There's so much that we can really learn from them. Also mentioned the See, Judge, Act process of discernment, and there's just some little signs here in terms of just some little prompts. As I said, in the little booklet, that's something that you can take away with you and reflect on it. It actually goes into a few different ways that you can discern. You could be actually coming more from like a feminist lens. You could actually be coming more from a political lens. There's different ways that you, when you're actually seeing an issue and then assessing it, how you actually judge that, how you assess that. It's obviously with theological reflection and prayer is a big part of it, but there are some key questions. So you really can bring it down into quite a lot of detail. It would be a great thing for people that feel they have that readiness and that skill now, that capacity. It would be a great thing to be investigated to do at a parish level. If there is that interest, that's the sort of thing that maybe in the new year it might be that we look at doing some training for people in that regard if they would like to really get started, because that's the sort of thing we want. It's not only about reading the document, but it's the action component. That's really what we want to see. Some of these comments were actually mentioned in last week in terms of some of the things we could do for those that are more politically savvy and ready for that sort of action now. Politicians absolutely read letters to the editor. The challenge sometimes is getting them printed. But if they get enough of them, they're more likely to print them. So, and then again, remembering that as a voter, you make sure that you voice. You say to your local MP, state MP, how important this issue is to you. Obviously, we have had a change of our leadership politically, and so, renewables is not such a dirty word. It's still not great, but, obviously there's things like that we can challenge. We're in a position to challenge that and in a position to influence. And again, I know that Nigel will go into more detail about some of these things with the Catholic Earth Care Australia approach. So yes, local action groups, family and friends, changing, improving your habits, that's exactly the comment that was made before. And there are a lot of people that, sometimes they think it's all too hard. We have to think about our children, our children's children. So we really do need to think about intergenerational justice and intergenerational solidarity. The reduce, reuse, recycle is something all of our children know, and it's something that obviously that's just one of many things that can be done. The renewable energy options, again, that's something that I know Nigel can speak more about. Nigel has actually been involved in looking at energy efficiency, and so in WA, and he links in with Catholic Earth Care Australia with that, so he actually has a lot of information that he can provide. We've already talked about some of the barriers to action, but it really is important to try and engage with people when they do say that, they come up with some of those barriers. And, if it's something that you're not sure how to actually counter that, then that's the sort of thing that would be really great, maybe even to come back to some of us, like someone like myself, and they're the sort of things that we can really explore, because we don't want it just to be left as a barrier. We actually want to look at ways that it does then become an achievable action. So we want to look at ways that we can then influence people so that they actually, do see that they can make a difference. And as I said, continue to come to this Laudato Si course. Obviously, there's a few more weeks to come, and we've all got taking some different tacks, if you like. So obviously, mine's a little more overarching because Genoa includes justice, ecology, and development. So it obviously has an overlap with all of the other agencies that will be speaking in weeks to come, so they can look at some of these issues in a bit more detail. Take action now to care for our common home. And climate change refugees need your action now. So again, I'd like you to take some of the information over there that's to do the Australian Catholic Bishops' Conference statements. And please take those back, even if you want to take a few, so you take some back to your parish if you haven't seen them there. With our approaching focus for the Year of Mercy, this quote from Pope Francis seems very relevant. Let us be renewed by God's mercy, and let us become agents of this mercy, channels through which God can water the earth, protect all creation, and make justice and peace flourish. As an aside, and I'm being opportunistic here, I'm also an ex-student of Mercedes College, and I know there's an ex-teacher of mine here. I was head girl there back in 1982, a long time ago. But I would like to acknowledge that next year will be 170th anniversary for the college, and obviously being the Year of Mercy, it's really very significant, so I just had to put that out there. I'm being very optimistic, I know. But I'm also mindful of the time. So now I'd like to leave you with a final quote from Pope Francis from Laudato Si. And I wanted to finish a little bit early because I've loved the energy that's been in the room. People have really been buzzing and it's been really exciting. And so that's the sort of thing we'd love you to continue. And hopefully finishing that little bit earlier will encourage that. But I'd just like to leave you with this quote before we actually say a final prayer together. All of creation speaks of God's love. Our insistence that each human being is an image of God should not make us overlook the fact that each creature has its own purpose. None is superfluous. The entire material universe speaks of God's love, his boundless affection for us. Soil, water, mountains, everything is, as it were, a caress of God. I mean, how beautiful is that? So I really do encourage you to read Laudato Si. It is like poetry. It's just beautiful. It really is such a gift. Yes?
I think it's still the case, if you're putting in petitions to politicians, that unless you put a formula on the bottom of it, they don't have to read it out. They can throw it in the rubbish bin. But if the formula is there, they must read it before the Parliament starts. And you can get that by consulting a local member or ringing Parliament House. I think that is still the case.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that feedback. Sorry, I need my glasses again. So now I'd like to thank you for your time this evening. Please take more of a look at the resources I have provided, including the See Judge Act booklet, to assist with your ongoing discernment of Laudato Si, and to help you determine how you can get more involved in promoting ecological stewardship as missionary disciples. You're all here, so you are all missionary disciples. I also have a Laudato Si bookmark for you that's in that little package. As much as I would like to claim this work, it was actually something that was done by the Sydney Justice and Peace Office. I had the opportunity to go over to the national launch, and they were actually showing that, and so they said we could provide some as gifts. So I'm very grateful to them for allowing that. If you have the time, I would really love you to stay for some refreshments, have more of a chat, talk about some of these things. Don't just focus on barriers, let's focus on actions, some of the achievable actions. But the community gathering, that's actually really important. So also in that little package, there's a closing prayer, and that's one that's actually from Laudato Si. It's actually a prayer for our earth together, and apologies that it's not actually up on the overhead, on the PowerPoint. So apologies if the writing's too small or a challenge for some people because of the colour. Yeah, I apologise for that. Okay, a prayer for our earth. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognise that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love and peace. Amen. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share some of my insights from Laudato Si. And blessings. Please stay for our gathering.